Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, of course. If you would, please. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Dark Wolf's Den. We have a bit of a feedback. I do apologize, but at least we know that we are broadcasting correctly anyway. Folks, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and if you would, really quick, please stand or at least put your hand over your heart for the pledge, or the Star-Spangled Banner, then the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, folks. Once again, remain as you are for the Pledge of Allegiance led by John Wayne.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's get this party started, folks. Ready for some darkness tonight.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live from a secret cave hidden deep within the wilderness of Tennessee. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup. We're tearing through the atmosphere. And we're tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Dark Wolf's Den radio show for Thursday, January the 20th, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are going to dive deep into the dark side of the fairy tales we grew up with. We did a show about this about a year ago, and now we're coming back, visiting it again, if you will, and doing a part 2. Hopefully covering some of those that we missed last time, and maybe reviewing others that we touched on before. That's all coming up here in just a moment, ladies and gentlemen, but first, let's go over here and see who all we have in our YouTube chat rooms, both on the Dark Wolf's Den Show YouTube channel, as well as the Ripon Rabbit Hole. How are you guys all doing over here tonight? Like JoJo's waving in over in the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Glad to see you, JoJo's. Always a pleasure, of course. Running the admin over there. And doing a great job, because we got a lot of devil monkeys from Biden, apparently. He says Euler Greg are on the loose. Beware. They seemed to be playing around in all the YouTube chat lately. Hopefully they'll be able to get rid of them, even though I have a feeling they're the ones behind them. But that's a whole another story. Anyway, Euler Greg, glad to see you over here. Also, my friend, hanging out with JoJo's in the Dark Wolf's Den Show chatting over in the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Maggie's Ace, the first in all the chats tonight, says, good topic. I can't wait, Dark Wolf. Well, definitely is worth the wait, I do hope, folks. The last episode we did of Dark Fairy Tales was very well received and actually was one of an audience favorites. So, let's hope this one becomes just the same. Sandy B. Don't like dark fairy tales, especially. There was a series about the Brothers Grimm and stories. Yes, I did know that there was one on there, but I had not watched that, as I haven't watched TV in many a year. Errol Taylor saying, hey everyone. Hey Errol, glad to see you. Of course, like I said, Sandy B hanging out over here. Earth Daughter says, hello all. Hello, Earth Daughter. Always a pleasure having you along for the ride. Like Raider Champion over here with the link to Chick and Michael Musco's Wonderland. For those that enjoy our opening theme, you can go get it yourself or listen to it yourself over on YouTube at this link that he's dropped into the chat. Terry Taggart with a woohoo, Terry. Always great to have that awesome energy too. They're called trolls, Jerry. Well, yeah, I think the trolling has went up a couple notches. Errol Taylor with the Let's Go Brandon. FJB, what can I say? And of course, whether you are listening on YouTube or around the world on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network at the RiponRabbitHole.com, or on our flagship station in Ripon, Wisconsin, we're glad to have every last one of you guys along for the ride, as well as those listening on the replay, both over on BitChute and Rumble. Go ahead and look us up over there and give us some subscribes and likes if you guys don't mind, right? But remember, always, anything happens here to our YouTube channel, you can always find us streaming still on the riponrabbithole.com, RIPONRABBITHOLE.com, ladies and gentlemen. And we are going to dive down into the fairy tale rabbit hole here in just a moment. A dark rabbit hole it is, but of course we have two more fun little segments we must do, the first of which we call Today in History. Our Today in History today, folks, is actually very special. For those who may not be aware, January 20th in the USA, at least every 4 years, is a very special year. Or day of the year, I should say. The day that most presidents are sworn in. Like on this day in 2017, when my personal favorite president from my lifetime, Mr. Donald J. Trump, is inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States of America, and Mike Pence as the 48th Vice President. That occurred on this day in 2017, ladies and gentlemen, and that is today's segment of Today in History.
Say what?
Our quote of the day today, folks, comes from a Tibetan proverb. It says, and I quote, "It is better to live for one day as a lion than for 1,000 years as a sheep." I don't know about you guys, but I try to live more like the lion and less like the sheep every day. And that is today's segment of
Say what?
You know, growing up, I loved the Disney Channel. That is one thing that I watched every day. And we're all familiar with a lot of the things that Disney has put out, from Cinderella to Pinocchio, Beauty and the Beast, and so on and so forth. However, we are very familiar with the sanitized version of these stories. A lot of these stories come from the Grimm fairy tales, and though named after the brothers Grimm, they were also quite grim in their telling. And we're going tonight to go over a lot of these stories that we've all grown up with, stories that we know and love, and have probably never truly heard the original story of. That's right. We're going to start tonight with, and by the way, we did part one of the Dark Fairy Tales last year. That was a very well accepted show, one of the fan favorites, as a matter of fact. We may end up going over some of these stories again that we did touch on the last time, but we're definitely going to throw a couple new ones in the mix also. The first one up on our list tonight, folks, Beauty and the Beast. It's funny, before picking this topic, for 2 days I had two different songs stuck in my head. One of them was A Whole New World. We'll get to that one here later. But Beauty and the Beast was the other one. I guess the universe was screaming at me to do this show, right? But that being a dark tale already, we still haven't heard the darkest parts if we've only heard the Disney version. Check this out.
Beauty and the Beast. This fairy tale was written by Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve in 1740, and while much of Beauty's story would be familiar to audiences, the Beast's backstory is decidedly different.
I'm really glad that she pronounced that name, because even though I'm really good at pronunciation, I doubt that I would have gotten that right. Terry Taggart over here says, sad, Disney is bad. I know, right? It's too bad that they've taken the road that they have taken, but just the same, they've actually cleaned up a lot of these, but it does make you wonder why they choose the ones they do to remake, especially as we go through this episode. You'll see exactly what I mean. If you guys remember the original Beauty and the Beast story, the Disney version at least, I don't know about the original. The original is what we're going over. But if you guys remember the one we all watched as kids, the Beast was a prince that lived in the castle, and the evil witch come, and he would not allow her to stay because he thought her ugly, so she turned him into a beast, which of course is a good moral lesson about judging others. However, that is not the original story of how he became the beast.
The prince's father died before he was born, and when a neighboring kingdom invaded, his mother left him in the care of a capricious and powerful fairy while she went off to war. The fairy raised him, but then tried to seduce and marry him. When he refused, she turned him into a beast.
So in this telling, it is a fairy that didn't get her way with him, if you will. So to make sure, because she couldn't have them, nobody else would, she made him unbearably ugly, a beast, if you will.
Another twist is that Beauty's real father turns out to be the Beast's mother's brother. In other words, Beauty and Beast are first cousins.
You heard that right, ladies and gentlemen. Beauty and the Beast were first cousins according to the story. That's quite disturbing, but nowhere near as disturbing as the Stockholm Syndrome that is later portrayed in this same story. As we know, Beauty is taken in by the Beast and not allowed to leave, and eventually ends up falling in love with and agreeing with her captor, for lack of better terms. This is the classic Stockholm Syndrome. So Beauty and the Beast already, as we see, was much, much darker than we originally had heard, right?
So, a heartwarming story of abandonment, child abuse, and incest. Tale as old as time.
Another one that is much darker than we originally had heard is the Frog Prince. We covered the Frog Prince last time we did Dark Fairy Tales, but is such a good one and has many dark themes in it, so we're going to go ahead and touch on that one once again. And I know you guys remember this one, you know, kiss the frog, he turns into a prince. I wonder how many of you girls went around kissing frogs as a kid, hoping that you would find a prince, right? Well, in this story, it doesn't have the happy ending that we all know and love. Check this out.
In the modern versions, a frog helps a princess, and in return, she graciously gives him a kiss, transforming him into a handsome prince.
That, of course, is the story that we all know and love. However, that is not what the original story actually said.
In the tale written down by the brothers Grimm, though, the princess is a spoiled brat. After she loses her golden ball, a frog offers to fetch it if she'll be his close companion. She lies, and when she gets what she wants, she runs away.
So already decidedly different from the original story that we know, where she merely gives him a kiss, he becomes a prince, end of story. No, this one goes much further.
When the frog shows up at the castle, she cries, complains, and finally hurls him against a wall.
So not only does she not kiss him, when he comes to confront her, she literally tries to kill him by throwing him against a wall.
The impact turns him human, and obviously concussed, we think, he decides to marry her.
That sounds like more of a move of desperation than want, right?
The only lesson the princess learns is that lying, using people, and attempted murder will win you a prince.
Again, much different than the sanitized Disney version that we all know and love. The Brothers Grimm were definitely a twisted sort, and I guess it's kind of good that they changed up this story, as teaching our young ones that things like that are okay is not good. Then again, it seems like the school system did the same thing if you look around at our society today, right?
Rapunzel.
Rapunzel, let down your hair.
If you're expecting a PG-13 story, think again. This tale went through several iterations in the 17th and 18th centuries, passing through French, Italian, and German hands before coming to the Brothers Grimm. In the original versions, Rapunzel's frisky times with the prince are revealed when it becomes obvious that she is pregnant.
So this is already decidedly different than the original tale of Rapunzel that we all know. As a matter of fact, I think they even left this particular part out of the Tangled version of Rapunzel that Disney did just a few years ago.
As punishment, the fairy or sorceress cuts Rapunzel's hair and banishes her to the desert. When the prince comes back for more hanky-panky, he's horrified to discover her captor there instead.
Definitely not a welcoming surprise to show up to when you expect to find the princess and you find a evil-looking fairy instead. However, this story only gets darker from here.
His logical solution is to jump out the window.
But either thankfully or unluckily, I'm not sure. Either way, he survives the fall.
Having lost his eyesight in the fall, he wanders the wilderness for years eating grass. There is a happy ending eventually, but not before the prince and princess suffer a lot of hardship.
So this one has the rare happy ending, albeit after the prince wandered blindly, literally blindly through the wilderness for many years, living on whatever nature would provide. He did finally find the princess again and have the happy ending that we all want. However, the next one on our list is nowhere near happy at all from beginning to end. Surprisingly, in the 90s, it was one of the most popular Disney movies and one that I enjoyed myself quite a bit. Of course, I'm talking about The Little Mermaid. This one here, once again, incredibly dark story from beginning to end.
The Little Mermaid. The original Hans Christian Andersen version of this tale is just haunting. After saving a prince from drowning, the Little Mermaid goes to a sea witch who promises to make her human in return for her voice and tongue. The transformation feels like a sword is cutting her in two.
So we start out with an incredibly painful transformation from mermaid into human, but that's only the beginning.
Every step she takes feels like she's walking on knives.
So every second of being human is incredibly painful and uncomfortable.
For her trouble, the prince falls in love with someone else.
So all this pain and suffering essentially for nothing at all, as the prince that she was trying to impress was not impressed by her. Maury, quote, "You are the father," Prince jumps out the window. Raider champion over here. Love it, but that would crack me up, I gotta say.
Her sisters give her a knife, saying that washing her feet in his blood will restore her mermaid form. In Andersen's original ending, she dies and becomes sea foam.
Definitely not the Disney version of The Little Mermaid that I grew up knowing. How about you guys? With the knife and cutting off the feet and being constantly in pain from being a human and dying in the end and becoming sea foam. None of that was in the Disney version. Definitely not a happy ending by any means.
In his revised version, she still dies, but is given a chance to go to heaven by doing 300 years of good deeds. So, yay?
Okay, that's fair. He revised it to be a happier ending, but just the same, it's got a lot of darkness to it. As she still dies, she just gets a new deal once she dies and the possibility to save her soul, if you will, but still dark on many levels. Definitely not the Disney version that I grew up with. And our next story on the list, folks, is a story that you may not recognize by name, as I did not recognize it by name, but you may very well be familiar with the story itself. This one is called The Goose Girl.
The Goose Girl. In this brutal tale, collected by the brothers Grimm, a princess sets off to a neighboring country to marry a prince. On the way, her maid decides hereditary monarchy is for losers and orders the princess to switch clothing and horses so that she can be in charge for once.
This reminds me of the telling of the Prince and the Pauper, right? Just a female version of the story.
The most easily swayed aristocrat in the world agrees. The princess ends up tending geese,
Thus the name of the story, of course, being The Goose Girl.
but just to be sure she isn't found out, the maid has the head of the princess's talking horse cut off.
Tough, but fair.
You know, I find it funny. All these different stories have these talking animals, and people accept it like it's the common thing. Yeah, it's a talking horse. Okay. But that aside, I know it is a fairy tale. That is pretty dark to cut off the horse's head just to try to keep the person silent.
Eventually, though, the switch is discovered. As punishment, the maid is stripped naked, shoved in a barrel lined with spikes, and rolled through town until she's dead.
Now, that's pretty brutal. I don't know about you guys, but I think rolling someone through town in a barrel full of spikes until the inevitable death occurs, pretty darn brutal in my book. Not to say that some punishment wasn't necessary. I get it, that's fine. But again, this is a fairy tale, folks. These are supposed to be for kids, and Grimm's fairy tales were never all that light, if you will. Anyway, a lot of them had a lot of dark and negative connotations, like the next one on our list, one that I can't remember if we covered the last time. I believe we did, but either way, we're going to touch on it again. One that's already decidedly dark just in the Disney version, the sanitized version that we all grew up with. That is, of course, Snow White. Snow White's already an incredibly dark story, but imagine how much worse it is without the Disney sanitation in it, right? But luckily, you don't have to imagine, because we're about to tell you right now.
Snow White. The Disney version of Snow White is already pretty bleak when you think about it.
Run away! Hide in the woods anywhere! Never come back!
But the Brothers Grimm version really ratchets things up a notch. Their first variation made it Snow's biological mother who gets jealous. She abandons Snow in the forest or has a servant do her dirty work.
Now, that's pretty bad just on its face, that the mother basically just abandons the child in the woods, or has her servant abandon the child in the woods. But that's actually the least dark of the things that would occur in this story.
Later versions added the huntsman, who's asked by the evil queen to bring back Snow White's lungs and liver so she can eat them.
Oh yes, nothing like cannibalism to make a good fairy tale, right guys? And as dark as that is, some would argue that may not even be the darkest part of this story yet.
The most drastic change is the ending, however, wherein the evil queen unwittingly attends Snow White's wedding, and the prince makes her dance in red-hot iron shoes until she dies.
You know, I gotta say, I wouldn't mind watching Kamala Harris or maybe Biden dance around in some red-hot shoes until they just melt away like the evil witch that they are, but that's just my opinion, of course. But just the same, once again, ladies and gentlemen, very, very dark sides of these fairy tales, right? And we're only just getting started. Like our next tale on the list tonight, ladies and gentlemen, one that is also a fan favorite of girls around the world growing up, and much, much darker than Disney has ever portrayed their favorite princess. That's right, Cinderella.
Cinderella. While there are many versions of this story from all over the globe, dating all the way back to 7 BC, we're focusing on the Grimm brothers' 1819 version. Cinderella's father is still alive, and apparently A-okay with the abuse his daughter faces at the hands of his stepwife and her daughters.
Now, you remember in the original, she was left with the stepmother because her father has died, right? So maybe the father not being dead is actually worse than him being dead. The fact that he knows about the abuse and allows it.
Following the ball, when the prince makes his rounds to find the girl who fits the missing slipper, the stepsisters are encouraged by their mother to cut off their toes and heels to make the slipper fit.
That's right. The evil stepsisters, in a bid to be with the prince, literally cut off their toes, as well as the heels of their foot, just to try to make this slipper fit. Because, you know, clearly the bloody foot and the lack of the amount of toes is what a prince wants, right?
Of course, the blood is a dead giveaway, and he chooses Cinderella anyway.
Even Cinderella's wedding is much different than the happy and joyous Disney version that we all know and love.
At the wedding, doves peck out the stepsisters' eyes. Karma is pretty awful.
Well, I guess a happy-ish ending. I mean, the stepsister's eyes got picked out, and that was, you know, a good revenge, I guess. But at least Cinderella got to marry the prince. There you go. So definitely a little different, once again, than the fairy tales that we all grew up and loved so much, watching from Disney and many other sources. Matter of fact, very few sources will cover the original fairy tales by Hans Christian Andersen and the brothers Grimm.
Little Red Riding Hood.
This is another one that is already decidedly dark in many aspects, of course, as we know, like the wolf literally eating the grandmother and taking her place. But that's, once again, just the sanitized version.
There are many early versions of the story, all of them laying the don't talk to strangers moral on real thick. In some, Red unwittingly eats part of her grandmother when the wolf offers her food.
Ah, yes. Once again, we find this cannibalism theme in the fairy tales. Kind of disturbing, right?
In others, she removes her clothes and gets in bed with the wolf. There are versions where Red is held captive but later escapes. In another, the wolf simply eats her. In yet another, she escapes after discovering her grandmother's remains. The brothers Grimm added the woodsman cutting the grandmother and Red free and filling the wolf's stomach with stones so that when it tries to run, it dies. Yeah, it's messed up any way you slice it.
And that story only seemed to get even more dark with each iteration. But of course, that music means that we have to go ahead and take a network break right here. And we will be back with more darkness in the fairy tales in the second half right after these messages. Stick around. Don't touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Oh yeah, Jerry Hicks on a Thursday night. Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Are you enjoying tonight's dark fairy tales? I know I am. If you are, and you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell, and you'll get our notifications every time we go live. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, bringing you the very best of common sense radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. I'll return again tomorrow night, Friday, January 21st. Come along with me as we journey deep down through the rabbit hole and explore how to get creative. We'll look at some people who have. We'll share some ways that we can get a little extra creative for extra credit points in 2022. Then Saturday night, an evening of experiments. That's right, Saturday, January 22nd. Explore the rabbit hole of experiments. We'll be talking about some of the most notable social experiments, as well as a few on-air experiments. It's going to be a fun night, Saturday, January 22nd. It starts at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as all shows do. So mark your calendars and be here or be square. Then we'll end out the weekend right together with you, Sunday night, January 23rd, with a time travel trip back to 1854. That's right, we're going to look at some of the political men of the day, some of the political women of the day, and why 1854 is so important to us, not only as a network, but as a nation and a world as well. As we've begun to heavily prepare for our Freedom Flame broadcast, which takes place on March 20th, our 5th annual Freedom Flame broadcast, and we're going to tell you a lot more about it coming up this weekend, as we are excited to share with you the story of the Freedom Flame, as we do every year. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. On March 20th, we can come together bipartisan and share in our recognition and unified support for freedom worldwide. Doesn't matter what color you are or where you're from. We'll return back to the Dark Wolf's Den radio show for Thursday, January 20th, and Dark Fairy Tales. You're listening to the Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, the Ripon Rabbit Hole.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show for Thursday, January the 20th, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad that you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have already tonight gone over some very dark fairy tales, from Cinderella and Little Red Riding Hood to a number of others, including the Frog Prince and the Goose Girl. The Goose Girl, like I said before, I didn't recognize the story until I actually heard the story. Then I remembered hearing it before, just not by that name. If you missed any of the first half, make sure you go back and check that out, or you can always check us out on demand at the riponrabbithole.com. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. Over there you can find all of the shows we've done all the way back to day one. That's right, folks. So make sure you go check that out in your spare time. But we're going to carry on with this episode as we continue to dive deep down the dark rabbit hole of dark fairy tales. That's right. Our next one on the list, another one we all grew up knowing and loving so well, as a very cheery, happy ending princess story that once again was a whole lot darker than we were told by Disney, of course, the original of Sleeping Beauty, of course.
Sleeping Beauty. First published as Sun, Moon, and Talia by Giambattista Basile, this
Another one that I'm very glad they pronounced the name, because I definitely could not have. I love the conversation that we have going over here on the YouTube chat platform here. Over in the Ripon Rabbit Hole, they are discussing well, they're got some good conversation on both sides, not going to lie. They're discussing the reason why perhaps these have been changed. And I pointed out earlier and have pointed out so far that there isn't a lot alike with these fairy tales from the beginning to now. They've sanitized it a lot, but perhaps they didn't sanitize it for everybody's good. The theory they're throwing out over here, I really like I said, is the idea that it was all a part of a massive agenda to tone down the stories on purpose, as to get rid of some of the morality and some of the truth being conveyed within these stories with the darker endings. So I'll let you guys ponder on that as we carry on, but definitely something that I hadn't considered. Really good theory going over here. I love it, guys. Keep it up. I love seeing both these chat rooms going with the chat. Euler Greg throwing in a glass of wine. Cheers. Euler Greg, cheers to all you guys.
This tale is as dark as it gets. Following the events of the Spindle Curse.
And for those that don't remember the Spindle Curse, it was said that Sleeping Beauty would prick her finger on a sewing spindle and would fall into a very deep sleep. You remember, once again, this being Sleeping Beauty. And of course, the curse did come true, as we know by the original story.
A king finds Sleeping Beauty, named Talia, assaults her in her sleep, and leaves. She becomes pregnant, gives birth, and only wakes up when one of her twins...
So she's found by a king who has his way with her, as they say, with her sleeping form, ends up getting her pregnant, where she gives birth to not one but 2 babies. Wow, that is incredibly disturbing, and still, that's not all.
Twins tries nursing her finger and sucks out the cursed splinter. Returning, the king is shocked to see Talia awake, but eventually slinks back to his wife. Yeah, he's also married.
Does anyone else get the feeling that the king is the bad guy here? Like, let's go ahead and add cheating to the list of things that he's done wrong so far, right?
After his wife learns of Talia and the twins, she tries to feed the babies to the king in revenge.
Is anyone else seriously disturbed by the amount of cannibalism underlying a lot of these fairy tales tonight? Once again, I want to point out that these are supposed to be fairy tales, what we in today's society read to our children. Thank goodness Disney sanitized some of these, because the originals might actually have gave me nightmares, not sweet dreams, right?
King discovers the plot and has her burned alive, and then marries Talia instead. Happily ever after?
A little happier ending than some of them on our list tonight, for sure. But definitely got a lot of disturbing elements in it, right? From cannibalism to non-consensual activities to births that were, well, to say the least, questionable, right? But I guess in the end, if they end up together, all's well that ends well, as disturbing as all of that really was. But we have another one on our list tonight, one that you might not think of as being that dark, as, once again, this is another one that already has a couple dark aspects of it in the Disney version, this story being The Ugly Duckling.
The Ugly Duckling. The original glow-up story, this duckling is an inspiration to everyone who looks forward to growing up and flaunting their fine selves at their haters.
Which in today's society seems to be just a common pastime, to flaunt yourself to your haters, right?
In the original by Danish author Hans Christian Andersen, however, his first flock never sees this transformation. He's harassed and bullied so bad he flees. A new flock he finds takes him in, but are soon massacred by hunters.
Wow, this duck has some really bad luck, right?
An old woman adopts him, but her cat and her hen are just as bad as his first flock. After a hard winter of isolation and neglect, he emerges from a frozen cave to find a flock of swans who finally accept him. There is a happy ending at last, but that's still a lot for one little bird to handle.
Once again, we have a semi-happy ending anyway. Not as dark as some that we've covered tonight, and definitely not as dark as others that we are going to cover here shortly. Like the next one on our list, another one that was already had some decidedly dark elements to it to begin with. That is, of course, Rumpelstiltskin.
The story of Rumpelstiltskin is fairly well known. A man brags about his daughter's ability to weave, claiming she's so good that she can turn straw to gold.
That part right there reminds me of alchemy, turning different elements into gold, right?
The king hears about this and forces her to prove her abilities under penalty of death. And an imp comes to save her. On the third night, he asks her something in return, and she has nothing to offer him. "Worry not, my dear," he says. "Just give me your firstborn child."
This, of course, already having a dark undertone to it, as this is a part of the story that was, of course, in the original, as we know.
The girl agrees, the room is turned to gold, and the king marries her. Of course, not long after getting married, she has a son, and the imp comes to take the child. She begs for a second chance and tells her that he will only give the child back if she discovers his name. Lo and behold, the girl does discover his name, and when he comes back to collect the child, she tells him that it's Rumpelstiltskin. Infuriated, the little imp stamps his foot so hard he lodges it into the ground, and in his fury, commits suicide by grabbing his left leg and ripping himself in half. Yeah.
Wow, that turned dark really quick, right? Definitely did not see that ending coming. Another one that is a lot darker than you may remember, if you know it at all. I am not familiar with this one, but perhaps some of you have heard of Undine?
Undine is a story about a beautiful maiden who lives by the seaside and the knight who falls in love with her. Sounds like your standard fairy tale, right? There's just one problem. The maiden doesn't have a soul.
Wow, that changed things dramatically. Maybe she's a redhead. I'm kidding, totally kidding. Love redheads.
People today might know Undine as a character from the popular video game Undertale. But back in the early 1800s, Undine was one of the creepiest German fairy tales around. The story of Undine starts off with a fisherman, his wife, and their young daughter. One day, the daughter slips from the mother's grasp and drowns in the lake. The fisherman and his wife mourn until later that day when...
Yeah, already pretty dark, but wait, there's more. Ain't that right, Maggie? Or Philo Fire, glad to see you, Deborah O'Connor, joining in also.
When Undine arrives at their cottage, blonde hair dripping with water. The fisherman decides to raise her as his own, and takes the silent, well-behaved child to be baptized, only for her to start screaming as soon as the ceremony is over. The ceremony causes Undine to grow willful and wild, but despite this, the family grows together happily. One day, a knight comes to the little cottage in the forest and falls in love with Undine, despite the fact that her lack of soul renders her terribly selfish and incapable of empathy.
So basically she's a zombie. This sounds to me like the original telling of a zombie story, right? She's drowned and come back to life. Like that reanimated the dead, right? Already kind of weird. Now the knight has fallen in love with a zombie nonetheless. Happy Italiana 27, glad to have you here.
Upon a priest's visit to the cottage, Undine marries the knight. He promises to love her forever, and on her wedding day, Undine is granted a soul by God. Undine and her knight return to the city, only to discover there was another lady close to her knight before this journey, a woman named Bertalda. Despite Bertalda's love for the knight, she and Undine become good friends, at first. But soon Bertalda learns the truth about Undine, that she is a water spirit, given a soul by love, and grows cold to her. And as
Okay, that's fair. She turns out to be a water spirit, so it may be not a zombie, but sure not far off, right?
As Batalda grows cold to her, she convinces the knight to grow suspicious of his wife as well. Undine despairs as over time she watches the love leave her knight's eyes and her knight leave her side for Batalda's. Finally, the day comes that Batalda, Undine, and her knight are all travelling by the waterside. Batalda's necklace, given to her by the knight, is stolen by a mischievous water spirit. She and the knight are incensed and blame Undine, who dips her hand into the water and pulls out a different necklace, one much fairer than before. But her husband sees this necklace as yet more proof of her strangeness, and finally shouts, "You are a witch, go and trouble us no more." Undine bursts into tears as she disappears beneath the surface of the river, never again to return to land. It does not take long for the knight to forget Undine and instead marry Batalda. And on that night, a ghostly figure emerges from their castle well and comes upon the knight. He looks upon the figure, who looks remarkably similar to Undine. "I have come for you, and you must die," she says to him. And so he does, for he had broken his promise to her, and he had to pay the price.
As we found a lot of times tonight, the happy endings aren't exactly in the cards for most of our fairy tale characters that we are used to having happy endings, right? Disney has really changed the story on a lot of these characters. Like the character Mulan, that's another very famous, as of recent, the last decade or so, movie. Those are the Mulan movies, but do you know the original story of Mulan?
In Chu Renho's novelization of Mulan's story, Mulan returns home from the war after nearly losing her life, only to discover that the father she left to protect is dead, and her mother has already remarried. On top of this, the Khan has requested to have Mulan brought to him, but not to honor her like in the Disney version. No, he wants her for his concubine. With her future stolen from her by a foreign ruler and everything she fought to protect somehow destroyed, Mulan commits suicide. Her final words are, "I am a girl. I have been through war and done enough. I now want to be with my father."
And yet another story with a not-so-happy ending. If I'm correct, I do believe Mulan was actually based on a real person. A girl that ended up pretending to be a boy to fight in the military, only to become one of its strongest heroes, I do believe. Really interesting story, but definitely not one with a happy ending. One more before we close it out. Tonight we have another well-known story that, once again, already had a lot of dark undertones to it. That is, of course, last but not least, the boy with the growing nose himself, Pinocchio.
In the original version of Pinocchio, our adorable puppet kills the talking cricket by hurling a hammer at it.
Okay, I don't know about you guys. I loved Jiminy Cricket, right? I couldn't imagine in the original tale seeing Pinocchio hurl a hammer at Jiminy Cricket and just splat. Thank goodness they did sanitize that piece, right?
Blames the cricket for being murdered, burns his own feet off on a stovetop while being lazy, leads townspeople to assume that Geppetto has abused him and lands Geppetto in jail, and finally, almost mercifully, is hanged. In fact, this is where the original story of Pinocchio was meant to end. However, the editor who initially published it asked the author for a better ending, leading to the invention of the Blue Fairy. Personally, I like the original ending the best.
And like I said a moment ago, that was already a very dark story with the kidnapping of the children and turning them into donkeys, and a lot of nefarious stuff went on just in the sanitized Disney version that we were all given to watch as kids. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is our second part of Dark Fairy Tales. If you ever do have the chance, I would suggest going and grabbing a copy of the original Grimm's Fairy Tales, or at least the closest remake that you can find, right? Not the movie, I mean the book itself. And sit down and have a read and see just how dark so many more of these fairy tales are. As we've only covered a certain number of them tonight, there are so much interesting tales within the books of the Brothers Grimm. That's right. And I, once again, hope you guys enjoyed that. But what do you guys think? Do you think the fairy tales are a whole lot darker than you remember them being as a child? Do you think we should even be reading these to our children? Especially when they find out the truth behind the tales? In the end, ladies and gentlemen, all you can do is look at the evidence, apply a little common sense, and...
You be the judge!
That's right, boys. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show for Thursday, January the 20th, 2022. I'm getting really good at getting that right. I'm proud of myself. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the den may be closing, but don't you worry, now that we've kicked the weekend off right, the weekend fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back tomorrow, Friday, January the 21st, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as AJ the Ripon Rabbit takes back to the airwaves with an all-new episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. This time he's going to get the creative juices flowing as he discusses creativity and most likely some tips and tricks that we can all use to be more creative in our daily lives and get around different issues that crop up through our day, right? He'll be discussing all that and more on Friday, January 21st, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows here on the network start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, like AJ's show on Saturday, January 22nd, 2022 at 7 p.m. Pacific. He'll be speaking about experiments. I don't know if you guys know, but AJ loves his on-air experiments, and I'm sure that he has more than a few lined up. That's right. He'll be discussing experiments, their impact on science, and the right way opposed to the wrong way to do them, I'm sure, and much, much more on Saturday, January 22nd, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific. Then on Sunday, January 23rd, 2022, at 7 p.m. Pacific, he'll be rounding the weekend out right with you as he discusses the year 1984. That's right, time travel back to the year of 1854. Did I say 1984? I must be thinking about what we're living in now. 1854, and the events of that year that still impact the world to this day. Believe it or not, there were quite a few, and that's going to round the weekend out right here on the Ripon Rabbit Hole, Ripon Common Sense Radio Network. One thing I'm sure he'll be speaking about on Sunday is the Freedom Flame. As you guys know, Ripon, Wisconsin is the home of the Freedom Flame, and we celebrate that every year on March 20th. Coming up very, very quickly this year is the 5th anniversary celebration of the Freedom Flame broadcast. And let me tell you guys, I was in the planning for this, and there is a whole lot of fun coming this weekend. For information from AJ about the upcoming events on March 20th. Something you guys definitely want to be a part of, and you can keep up with everything if you go to the riponrabbithole.com. Once again, that is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. You're gonna find all the latest updates of what's going on here in the rabbit hole, as well as worldwide news. Make sure you sign up for your Backstage Pass to allow you access to all of the site, where you can find more than just news. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you can find every episode AJ and I have ever done on demand. We are having a little issue with YouTube right now, so if you go in there and are having some issues getting to the videos, we are working on that. We are well aware of the error, right? But since that is down, you can check out our groups section over there. There's groups for the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, the Ripon Rabbit Hole radio show, as well as different groups set up by our amazing rabbit members, like Juanito 1975's Lucid Dreaming Group, the Mandela Effect, the Mandela Effect Conference, and so much more. By the way, guys, we did do a Mandela Effect conference the other day. Go check that out when you get the chance. Also, over on the riponrabbithole.com, folks, one last thing you're going to find is the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's where myself and a lot of rabbits will be right after the show, and we would love to see you there. With that said, folks, we have to get out of here for this week. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure hanging out with you guys, as it always is. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of AJ the Ripon Rabbit, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, Walt House, Red Shed Studios, and Tom Bayless for this amazing music. On behalf of all these folks, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and you've been listening to the Dark Wolf's Den radio show exclusively on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Until next time, folks, till next Wednesday anyway, remember, stay awake, but dare to dream. That's right. Oh yeah, and let's go, Brandon. Ha ha. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Maggie's Ace. Think Pinocchio, not Beauty and the Beast. Might make a little sense. You guys know what time it is. Let's put it in the chat. See it roll up.
Some things are better left unknown.
Let's go, Brandon.
Never find you here, 'cause no one's ever.
I see you there, JoJo's in the chat. Let's go, Brandon FJB. Let's go, Brandon FJB. Roll it up, guys. Let's see.
Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis.
Spam it out, guys. I don't mind.
What a sinner.
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. Sandy B out there. That's right. Maggie's Ace. FJB. FYT. That's right. Let's hear it. Scream.
What's the truth in this riddle?
FJB.
Is love really just this simple?
FYT.
I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays.
What? Let's go, Brandon. You guys know. A dark winter, my butt.
What a widow.
Maybe where he's at.
Peaceful spider.
What?
When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider.
Sneaky indeed.
Hide the lies and the alibis.
What a sinner.
Is it in her?
Donald J. Trump says, Maggie's Ace, I see you over there, overprotected. Let's go, Brandon. Sandy B, FJB, that's right. JoJo's with the Let's Go, Brandon. Brandon lives in a wonderland of delusion. Once again, Biden lives in a wonderland of confusion.
Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a
Dark delusion.
Is this real or or just illusion.
He's wandering around in a wonderland of confusion. Let's go, Brendan. That's right, Sandy B. Joe's throwing it up there. Let's go, Brendan. FJB. Let's go, Brendan. FYT. FJB. Big tech is going down, folks. Mainstream media liars. Check out the new book, Moon Madness, by first-time author J.W. Hicks. Originally conceived in 2015, this fictional novel only becomes more and more relevant by the day. What would you do if you found out that almost everything your government has told you was a lie? In the year 2103, Jeremy Carlson and his fiancée Brittany Parsons decide to take a vacation in a lunar cabin. Everything was going great until strange things started happening after they went to sleep. Are they being abducted, or are they catching moon madness? A strange phenomena thought to be caused by the lower gravity of the moon. After a fateful meeting with a guy named Zach Marshall, things become a whole lot more clear. They are now determined to expose the governing body of the Earth and Moon, known as the World Council. Will the three of them succeed, or will things go horribly wrong? Find out in the great novel, once again, by first-time author J.W. Hicks, called Moon Madness. Available now on Amazon, $12 for paperback, $7 for Kindle. Not adding this to your bookshelf would be madness. All right, before I cut myself off, mainstream media is going down, folks. Just watch. I'm telling you, I challenge mainstream media right now. Tell the truth of what's going on in the world. Challenge they cannot and will not accept. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of here. We'll see you next Wednesday. Good night. Stay awake. Dare to dream. FJB. Let's go, Brandon.